evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Motor City Mad Mouth Show. Yes, I am at the Motor City Mad Mouth, but I have a special guest and a great colleague and a great friend of mine. His name is George Richards, and George and I go back a few years. And I'll tell you what, to show you how much respect I have for Mr. Richards, he is in my book, okay, Lessons from the Microphone. You don't make the first copy unless you're worthy of getting in there. And that guy across from me definitely got in. And you know what? When you get an opportunity to pick it up, let me tell you, I have stuck at this guy. Look at all the graphics. You know he's a pro at this anyways. Seriously, I love it, man. But you earned your way in that book, George, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. What's going on? How's your summer?
Oh, I'm busy, man. We're staying busy all over the place. If it's 1 minute I'm in Detroit, next minute I'm in Wisconsin. It's been a nonstop. And now I'm headed this weekend to the Miami, Florida game up in Gainesville. We want to make sure we get what we have to get in. So it's been productive. Anytime you build an organization like you have, George, like Florida Hockey Now, we'll get into that in a moment. You know, it takes a lot of work, whether it's networking, whether it's showing up at places. Building an organ isn't that easy, and you just have to put the time and the sacrifice and the work to do it, as you can appreciate now with what you've done remarkably down here in South Florida with, by the way, Florida Hockey Now, which this guy happens to be the owner, the main man.
And publisher, right? Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I hope you have a good time in Gainesville. I hope you don't wear, long pants and, a suit or anything. I mean, that press box at Florida Field, I don't think is air conditioned. So, I want you to stay cool up there. It's called the swamp for a reason, man. So I hope you enjoy yourself there.
Well, I don't know if I can get away with shorts. Nobody wants
to. Well,
look
I don't know about that. But
I'm kidding with you. You think somebody wants to look at a 61-year-old pair of legs? Now, what I end up wearing up there in terms of
don't bring the parka. I'll just say that.
No, I won't. No.
It's not Detroit.
Yeah, I'll probably end up bringing either a halfway in between a sweater or a long sleeve shirt that I could roll up, or maybe not. I don't even know, but whatever.
Yeah, I'd go that way. Or, maybe get like like what you got on, a polo shirt. I think that's perfect. Again, the press, I'm telling you, it's hot up there.
The only time I was actually, though, up there, George, is when Florida Atlantic took on Florida. And at that time, Howard Schnellenberger was the coach, and a guy by the name of Rusty Smith put on a good show. And the Owls didn't get blown out as bad as many people thought that they were going to. They gave it a game until Florida ran away with it in the second half. So
that's Howard for you, baby.
So, all right, let's first of all, if you're new to the audience or you're coming back, I want George to introduce himself and tell people how long you've been covering the Panthers, and then I want to talk about Florida Hockey Now. So let everybody know that I call you Mr. Panther when it comes to a publisher here. So go ahead, Mr. Panther.
Yeah, I've been covering the Panthers now 20 years, and first for the Miami Herald, and then for the Athletic, and now as publisher of FloridaHockeyNow.com. And I've seen some bad hockey. I've seen some really good hockey, especially lately, and it's been a lot of fun covering this team the past couple years. They've really turned things around, obviously, and man, it's weird. It's weird seeing this team be at the top the way they are. I mean, right. Not only winning the Stanley Cup, but just I don't know. The last couple of years have really been enjoyable. It's a good bunch to cover. Paulmaurice is terrific. Billzito, of course, the staff that they've got there in Florida. It's a good bunch to deal with. So it's been good.
All right, so what I want you to do, and I want to make sure you get this message out there as strong as you can, I want everybody in the audience as well, and they'll be coming in, so you'll have an opportunity probably to bring it up later. I know time should be.
I got it right behind me, bud. It's right there.
Yeah, look at this guy. So I want everybody to know how they can subscribe to Florida Hockey Now, and tell them what Florida Hockey Now is all about. What's going on, Joshua Dorr? This guy's one of your biggest fans out there, so you're going to hear from him a lot throughout the night. And Orlando Escribano, darn shame Florida is better than Detroit in hockey. Well, George will have a comment on that later in the show, Orlando. So hang in there with us.
He's have for a while. It's been a while. Florida's been pretty good against Detroit the last 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, they're head-to-head is what it is. No, it's okay. It is what it is. Yeah, it's hard to really go against the facts. I mean,
I remember. I'll go back real quick. I remember I covered the game. It might have been like 2011, 2012.
Right.
The Panthers hadn't won at joelouisarena in like a decade. And I think that it might have been Radek Dvorak had a couple goals or something. And Florida finally won a game at joelouisarena. And then from then on, I mean, the Panthers beat them all the time up there. It was just, even when the Panthers were bad and Detroit was good. I don't know what it is about Florida and Detroit, but they've really been, even Detroit was still good back then, and Florida would go up there and win. It kind of boggled the mind.
Okay. Well, what I want you to do that won't boggle your mind, because get ready for Josh Adore. He's gonna be active. Candy, put that one up in just a moment, okay? Because I definitely want to get to that before we get to some of our stuff. But George, let everybody know how they can subscribe to Florida Hockey now, and not only once, but you can do it again, and then I'll have you do it later in the broadcast. How does that sound?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. No, go to floridahockeynow.com. We cover the Panthers every single day. We've had a story, at least one story about the Panthers every single day this offseason. Check it out. Some are behind a paywall that costs $3 a month to subscribe, or you can get a yearly subscription for $30. We do have some exclusive content on there. But a lot of stuff is free just because it's, it's just normal content. But our exclusive stuff, columns, mailbags, in-depth features, one-on-ones with players and coaches and front office members and stuff like that. But again, you're supporting coverage. It's me, man. It's Florida. I'm the only, that's all I got. So yeah, I appreciate the support, and come check it out. floridahockeynow.com.
And you know what? You're going to repeat that later in the show. All right. Well, let's go to Josh Adore. I told you he's going to be active.
Yeah.
He's one of your biggest followers. So all right, Josh, you're here with George Richards. You've had a chance to read them. So let's go ahead and talk about your article about when they used to cover the seats upstairs. Brought me back to the good old days. All right. So why don't you go ahead?
the good old days.
Yeah, right. I know Josh is trying to. I think Josh is laughing behind. He's laughing in the chat room, but you can't see him. But go ahead, please elaborate on that.
Yeah, I wrote today, Wednesday, I wrote a story. It just came up in my Facebook memories or something I had written for the Miami Herald about that Michael Yormark, back then, the team president of the Panthers, they had sold advertising on these tarps that they were going to put all the way around the upper deck of the last 10 rows, I think it was, around the entire upper deck were going to be tarped off, because the Panthers, they have one of the biggest arenas in the league, 19,000 plus, and they didn't need it. Like Josh just said, they couldn't give tickets away, so they wanted to make it smaller. So I was like, geez, can you remember that? And then I remember 4 years later when vinnyviola and them came in, the attendance was so bad, they put curtains down. They covered up an entire end zone of seats with a curtain to make it small. They turned it into a 15,000 seat arena, and they still didn't need it. They only got 11,000 for opening night, because that's when vinnyviola bought the team. They said no more freebies, no more discounted tickets, none of that junk. Whoever pays is going to be here. And they were like, there might be 5,000 people that pay. Good, that's all we're going to have, and that's all they had. That year was rough. From an attendance standpoint, but they really did reset the market. People, listen, when the Panthers finally made the playoffs in 2012, I had people coming up to me going, I can't get free tickets. I want to go see the playoff game, but where are the free tickets? Right. People were just so used to getting free tickets, whether they went to the sandwich shop across the street or ran into Randy Moeller at the gas station with a stack of tickets in his pocket. That's how they operated back then. And vinnyviola and his staff, they put an end to that stuff. And now you look at the arena and, they're getting 20,000 people in there for playoff games. And if they could add more seats, they would. They're going to be sold out more often than not this season. And it's good to see. I mean, again, the Panthers were really bad for a really long time. They've been pretty good for a pretty long time now. And it's showing. They've got some pretty good support down here in South Florida.
So, George, tell me what media coverage was like back then. Obviously, we have to do our job anyway.
Sure.
I was coming down back then as a visiting writer for the Detroit Red Wings, because at the time I was working with, the Detroit Monitor and George Eichhorn, and Mike Lewis was certainly very helpful.
Of course, Mike Lewis, right. Yeah, Mike Lewis was a great guy with the PR staff. Trying to get Mike Lewis to write columns for us at Florida Hockey Now. Just like, I'm glad you threw that out there. The door's open, Mike Lewis.
And Mike, and I'll just throw it out even more. Mike Lewis is actually one of the best PR guys I've ever worked. And
He was
he
great.
like
No, Mikey was great.
he's also in my book, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but going back to what was media coverage like back then?
It was actually pretty good, because it was a different era back then, right? When I first started, you had the three newspapers down here. Brian Begain covered for the Palm Beach Post.
Right.
Michael Russo had just left the Sun Sentinel and gone to Minnesota. And Steve Gorton replaced him, and I covered for the Miami Herald. So you had the three major newspapers. What you didn't see a lot of was the television, because, by the time Dolphin season ended, the Panthers were pretty much usually out of the playoff race. There was really no reason to come. And now it's a different world because, the Sun Sentinel doesn't cover the team. The Palm Beach Post doesn't cover the team. The Miami Herald covers the team a bit, but not like we used to. I mean, we went to all the games. We covered all 82. If it wasn't me on the road, it was somebody else. We sent someone else on the road. And those days are gone, and we all know, the reasons why and stuff, but, so we're trying to fill that void here, covering this team. And, we're not a fan site. Florida Hockey Now, that we're not a fans. This is not, the team has been good. And since I've started this thing, the team's been good. My first season at with Florida Hockey Now was the 2021 COVID season. And they ended up almost winning the division. They went to the playoffs, and so things have been pretty good for the Panthers. But what I'm saying is, it's a news site. If the Panthers do wrong, I'm going to tell you they did wrong. If they do right, I'm going to tell you they did right. And it's it like, again, they've been pretty good the last couple of years.
All right, let's go. All right, we're going to go with Joshua Doerr's comments. I'm going to read some of them off because some we've already discussed. And then we're going to continue to roll through and then get to the stuff I have. I think the stuff tonight, George, will actually be just as important in the chat room as what I have prepared. We're going to cover all bases. So anyways, obviously, Joshua, if they couldn't pay people to show up then. All right, we already addressed that. All right, so now Joshua wants to ask you when I'm going to have Rod Peterson on with us. How do you like that? Because let me just tell you, what we've done is we've gone ahead and revive Fire Up Florida, okay? And the reason why we've done that is because he covers the Cats and Bolts, so that gives me an opportunity to bring in Tampa as well as the Panthers. So it's kind of neat, you lead off with a hockey topic or two, and then we get into the regular thing. But you know what? I want to go back to one other thing that you mentioned, okay? That I think it's important about this. When there was a lady, and I'm not going to mention any names at all, that talked about us being a fan website with motorsports. At that point in time, I vowed I'm not covering you guys ever again because we're not. And what that pretty much told me was you didn't go to our particular website to check it out. So why would I invest money into you? Okay, if you didn't have the decency to do your due diligence about us. We are not. We cover a lot of different things at the Trib, and obviously hockey and all the sports.
Sure.
I'm not going to sit here and promote people to get seriously injured or fatally injured on here. Yes, if you want to go to a website, you can see it, but I'm not going out there promoting that stuff. But so that's why I appreciate what you said about Florida Hockey Now, George, not being a fan site. Because like anything, we're taught in this industry, you got to be objective whether you like it or not in order to be fair to the audience that you have. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and they expect that. I mean, the players, the coaches, and all that, they may not like it, but they expect tough questions after losses and after whatever. They expect that, and they don't want to be tossed softballs in the press conferences. So that kind of, listen, I've just try to do the job and cover the team the best I can. And I think we do that. I think we do a pretty good job of covering this team. There's not too many stones left unturned when it comes to the Florida Panthers on our website. So, and again, we had to do that. We had to do that stuff. Hey, Rod, we had to do that, back in the day, covering this team when there was a lot of competition, man. There was there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. You didn't know that you got scooped on a story or that you scooped someone else until the next morning, So, us old dinosaurs, we remember those days, right?
Well, don't even get me started. Otherwise, you won't get to sleep tonight.
Now a scoop lasts you what, 18 seconds?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
And
and then
that's
somebody with sources puts up, oh yeah, I've heard that. My sources tell me, yeah, okay.
yeah. I actually have a lot of nicknames. Scoop happens to be one. So, all right, let's go to the chat room. Joshua Door wants to know, and I will go slowly on these. George, when are you going to hop on? When is Rod? When are
I'm
you going to
seeing
hop
some of
on?
them, yeah.
Yeah. So he wants to know when you're going to hop on our show, Rod and I.
Well, whenever I get invited, I mean,
Well, all right. You just set it
the
out here.
invitation has to be offered. I'm not just going to storm in.
No, no.
Uninvited.
You talk about you.
I don't crash parties now, Scotty.
Let me tell you something, George. You got it. Let me tell you, from one colleague to another friend, whatever you want to call me, okay? You have an open invitation to come on anytime you want, period. Exclamation point, Ron Punkosher. Exclamation point.
Well, that's
No
sweet.
question mark.
There you go. All right.
All right. So, we'll go to Orlando's in a moment. Well, actually, go to it now, hoping Stevie Y brings that Florida Magic back up north to Detroit. So that's what he says. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So do they.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so let's go on to a couple of things here, and we're going to continue to roll with the chat. How does it feel to finally cover a team that won the Stanley Cup? Because I know that when we go back to what happened last year against Vegas, and I actually predicted it. You tell all your Panthers PR people that, or anybody that cares, and I say I predicted the Panthers would win this year because they went out there and lost the year before. And I can say that because when I was covering the Bad Boys many years ago, the Pistons came back after a tough loss of the Lakers and went on and win a couple. The Red Wings lost to the New Jersey Devils, and how did that work out? Won a few cups there. Sure. So what I ended up doing is trying to rationalize the whole thing, George. All right, the Panthers got in that year really against Vegas. They kind of, I don't want to say backed in, but they made it by, they barely made it. But once you get in, it's a different animal.
It's a different animal for sure. And that all of last season could have changed so dramatically. We talk about them making the playoffs as the 8th seed.
Right.
And maybe back then, I don't. They were helped, sure, when Pittsburgh lost that game, that home game to Chicago, which I still can't believe that they lost that game. We were at the bar watching the Chicago Blackhawks the night before. They played at home, looked awful, looked like an AHL team, and then they've got to go to Pittsburgh the following night. Pittsburgh really needs that win, and they beat Pittsburgh. We still can't believe that. So anyway, Florida clinches. But even if Pittsburgh had won that game, Florida still had a game left. Florida, and that game would have meant something to Florida. That game against Carolina, Florida still could have won its way into the playoffs. Still, it would have been on the last day of the season. They're still the 8th seed, right? Then they're down 3-1 to Boston, and that game 5 could have turned in any different ways. And the Florida Panthers go out in 5 in the first round, and it's ho-hum, right? But they end up winning that. They win the series. So they go to the finals. They're beat up, and they end up losing to Vegas, a better Vegas team at the time. This team this year, coming into training camp, without Brandon Montour, without Aaron Ekblad for the first couple weeks, you could just see a different. I mean, they were businesslike from the start of training camp. They were back on the ice 2 weeks after the Stanley Cup final. They were like, we're getting back to this thing, baby. We're getting back. And lo and behold, they did it. There was a lot of hard work. A lot went into it. But they also learned a lot over the years. This team has learned that they can go through a couple losing skids here and there. And they did that. But, they were sick. They were a little beat up. They come home for that final home stand, and people are like, what's going on with these guys? They stink all of a sudden. And then they win the rest of their games, and they win the Atlantic. As far as covering a winning team, it is different because me and Goldie always have that joke, they're 3 points out, but, they have a game in hand. That was always kind of the joke with the Panthers. They'd always turn it on at the end when it was a little too late. And now you see this team, especially last year, they were in control from the start. You knew that they were going to get one of the top 3 seeds in the Atlantic, whether they won it or not. I don't think they cared. They were going to finish second or third in the Atlantic, and they ended up catching Boston. Boston didn't want to play Tampa in that first round, and you saw, Boston's last 2 games of the season where they just completely, they looked like an AHL team, and Florida was able to catch them and win the Atlantic, and things work out the way things work out. Florida needed to beat Tampa, right? They needed to get over that Tampa hump and did it.
Right.
When they did that, I was like, this team might be going back to play for the Stanley Cup, and they did.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing I can always tell people out there is when you have a bitter loss or series loss, it stays with you for a long time. So, it's not
It
easy.
really does. Well, you can go one of two ways, right? It can demoralize you,
right?
Or it can strengthen your resolve. And I think it did with the Panthers. They stood on that ice. Edmonton went into the locker room. Those Edmonton guys were in the locker room when Florida was out there celebrating. The Panthers, when they were in Vegas, stayed on the ice. We've got a picture. I've run it a number of times. You see Tampa Bay over by there, and then they're here, the Panthers. They kept that in their memory bank, man. And they really used that as fuel for last season.
Yeah, you can't get any more motivation than standing there watching somebody celebrate one. And let's not kid ourselves, folks, okay? You have to win 16 games to win the Cup. Back when I was growing up, it was 8. There were 8, but now you have what?
Kind of like an octopus, right?
Right. Well, that's what it was. Yeah, an octopus. But you have 8 games to win. Now that's twice as much. And now you have what, 30, 32 teams? I think that's 32.
It's tough.
Now.
No. It's the hardest thing to win. I mean, you talk about tournaments. It's fun watching March Madness because you've got all these underdogs and stuff. But boy, to win 4 7-game series back to back, that is a rough. That's tough to do. You look at the New York Rangers, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Before they win it in '94, they hadn't won it since 1940. Right. Fast forward, last year's the best team they've had. Since the mid 2000s, the 2010s or whatever. And they run into the Panthers. I mean, that New York Rangers team was stacked, and they could, so it's rough. It's tough to do.
Yeah, well, what they did is certainly remarkable. We want to congratulate the Panthers for doing what they do. We'll get into other things as the show progresses on. So we're going to talk about Billzito and Paulmaurice. What I want you to do is we're going to do a 2-part. Give me your comments on Billzito. When you're done, transition over to Paulmaurice. Because the one thing you told me when we were at a Marlins game, and you and I have been there a lot. I've covered a lot of baseball, and my schedule's all over the planet. That you once told me you don't think the Panthers are going to be as good as the year before when Andrew Brunette was there, but they're not going to be bad. But then they had that coaching change there. So let's go ahead. We'll talk. You can talk about that. Then I want you to go into Billzito and then Paulmaurice. So you got 3 questions with a price of 1, if you get what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, going back to that, you asked me. The Panthers had won 122 points, win the President's Trophy, get swept in the second round, look awful, right? They didn't look good in those playoffs. Even the series they won against the Washington Capitals, they did not look good in that. It was Carter Verhaeghe carrying that team on his back in that first round. Or Florida gets knocked out in the first round by a crummy Washington team. That was a crummy Washington team, and Florida, Florida was almost down 3-1 coming. It was bad. So the Panthers make that coaching change. So that took a lot of guts by Billzito to say, you know what, this team is good, but we need to make it better. We need to change the way we play. And he lets Andrew Brunette go because he knows to change the team, he needs a veteran guy who's not going to change. We all love Bruno. We all love Andrew Brunette, but he would have been a first year full-time coach, trying to change the culture of a team that had just won 120, that put up 122 points. The first time they lose 3-4 games in a row and the heat starts and the outside noises start, what do? Naturally, you go back to what worked and you try and get some wins and all that stuff. Paulmaurice was not going to do that. He told me that on day 1. He goes, George, I don't care about getting fired. We lose 3, 4, 5 games. We're sticking to the plan. And that's exactly what they did that year, last 2 years ago. The first half of the season was, what is this? and fans were going nuts. And I think both Bill and Paul heard some of that outside noise because fans were upset. Like you got rid of Brunette for this. Now all of a sudden, instead of us winning games 6-4, 7-4, 7-5, we're losing games 3-2. Is this what we're boring? But it clicked. The players finally, this guy's not changing his mind. We better get with the program. And they were a different team in the second half of the hockey season. They end up getting into the playoffs, and you saw this is a playoff. This is a team, that style is playoff hockey, and that's what Paulmaurice brought, and that's what billzito changed. He was able to pull off the Matthewtkachuk deal. That took, some major cojones to make that. You trade your all-time leading scorer who had just had a career year in jonathanhuberdeau. You throw in a top-pairing defenseman. You throw in a first-round pick. You throw in a prospect for one player. Guess what? Not only billzito, probably if Calgary would ask for more, probably would have given them more because he needed Matthewtkachuk. He needed to get rid of the headache that was coming with jonathanhuberdeau's. He foresaw all of this. He saw it. He looked into the future. Billzito's done an amazing job tearing down this roster with the team getting better every year. When have you ever seen this? He took over this team in 2020, and there's 4 players left.
Right.
And the team has only gotten better each year. This was a complete rebuild, retool, but you still had Ekblad, you still had Barkov. Bobrovsky got better during it.
Right.
And Louisarena was here. I'm surprised billzito hasn't won, GM of the year, but that's voted on by general managers. So it is what it is. It's kind of a fake award. He doesn't care. But no, he's done a really good job of rebuilding this team. His first trade, 2 weeks into the job, he gets Patrick Hornquist here. That completely changes the Florida Panthers. He gets rid of a bad contract, and Mike Matheson, who I just saw a couple weeks ago at aaronekblad's thing. Mike Matheson, one of the greatest guys you'll ever know, but that was a bad contract, and he was able to get rid of that. And things have just grown from there. And I think, and then Paulmaurice, what can you say? You listen to what Sashabarkov says about him. He knows what he's talking about. He's been through every situation in hockey over the years. I mean, the guy, he was the coach of the Hartford Whalers, for goodness sake. He's been around a little bit, right? Most kids don't even know what the Hartford Whalers are. They might know the logo, but they don't know what it is. He's done a great job with the Panthers, and it's just been a marriage made in heaven for Florida. Zito and Maurice, and they work together very well. And the team has bought in, and that's the biggest thing. The team has bought in 100%, and you see it on the ice.
Well, the one thing I can tell you right now, is having been around the game my whole life, being born and raised at least in a original Six City,
right,
is this, the 2 words that come to my mind, is a great general manager cannot be afraid to make bold moves. You just can't. And if you are, then you have no business being in the business anyhow. And as far as Paulmaurice is concerned, let's not forget, this guy went out there and led the Carolina Hurricanes into the finals only to lose to the Detroit Red Wings. So It's not like he hasn't seen the Stanley Cups from start to the final round. The only thing that changed this year, he finally got over the hump and won it all.
Right.
But it's not like he hasn't been playoff. It's not like he hasn't been playoff tested. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. You're absolutely right. And you look back at that. What was that? 2002.
Yeah.
2002 with Carolina, and they went through some rough times moving from Hartford to North Carolina, and they played in Greensboro, but the team was based in Raleigh, which is like 90 minutes away. So he basically told the guys just show up for the games. They didn't practice, and then lo and behold, a couple of years later, they're in the Stanley Cup final. They take game 1, if my memory serves. They won game 1 of that Stanley Cup final, then lose 1 in like double or triple overtime. I mean, so they lose in 5, but it was a good series. And then he doesn't get back all those years. He coaches in Russia. He does broadcasting. He's living in Columbus, Ohio, playing golf. And then he gets back in with with the Winnipeg Jets, and
right.
The ashes of the Atlanta Thrashers, he helps build into a really good Western Conference team, and lands with the Panthers. 20 years, I think, 21 years in between Stanley Cup final appearances. And that's the thing about Paulmaurice, too. If you ever want to criticize Paulmaurice, the first thing people would say, well, he's the losingest coach in the NHL, right? And that's what people were saying. They said it through the playoffs when the team lost a 3-0 lead. You were hearing Paulmaurice, well, there it is, the losingest coach in NHL history. Well, yeah, have you seen some of the tire fires this guy took over the years? Yeah, he's coached some really crummy hockey teams, starting with the first one. Those Hartford Whalers were awful.
Right.
They had their bags packed, and he's a 28-year-old guy trying to coach these guys. He's a hell of a coach who's taken on some bad jobs and turned them around for the most part. He couldn't do anything with Toronto. I don't know if anybody could back then.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they can now either.
They were terrible back then. Those Carolina teams were bad. Listen, the Winnipeg team was bad. Paulmaurice has done a real good job here. Long story short, and the players love him. They love his dry humor, his personality, and again that he won't change. And they finally were like, this guy is not going. We better start playing. And then he throws F-bombs at him when they need it, but he doesn't do it all the time. And that's why I think a lot of people are, when the Panthers have a bad period, I'd like to be in that room when Paulmaurice gets in there. I'll bet you $10 he doesn't even go in the room most of those times, because he doesn't even go in the room. The guys will figure it out. He treats them like men. He treats them like the NHL players that they are, and that goes a long way.
All right, we're going to go to a station break real quick. Bring Candy up again. George and I are obviously getting going here, but we have a lot of other things to talk about in case you just joined us. After the station break, George is going to let everybody know how they can subscribe to Florida Hockey Now. We have a lot more show to go, but Candy's got to take care of business on our end first, and then we'll transition over to you in Florida Hockey Now. All right, Candy, go ahead.
South Florida Tribune published a book last December, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by none other than Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morgenroth. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Apple and Google Books. Get your copy today. You can also find a link to it on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can also find a link to our merchandising store. Go get a hat or a sweatshirt or a t-shirt for South Florida Tribune or the Motor City Madmouth. You can also read other articles by Scott and a plethora of football, especially if you're into college football down here in Florida. We have football news from the Gators, the Hurricanes, the Seminoles, the Owls, and the Bulls. Come over to our website, check it out. If you see the red subscribe button in that lower right-hand corner, that means you have not subscribed to us yet. Please do so. Like us, share us all over. If you like to listen to podcasts, we're wherever you get your podcast. Back to you, Scott.
All right. Well, George, we'll just want to make sure that he's able to go out there, and knowing him, he probably had my favorite beverage, Diet Mountain Dew. That's why I'm pretty loud anyway. So, meanwhile,
I'm just drinking water.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I'll tell you, I like the cup. Anyways, George, I want you to go out there in case people are just joining us tonight. Why don't you let everybody know how they can subscribe to Florida Hockey Now?
Yeah, just come on by floridahockeynow.com. Right up at the top, you can subscribe. It's about $3 a month or $30 for the year. Come and join us. We're having fun at Florida Hockey Now, floridahockeynow.com. Daily, in-depth coverage of the Florida Panthers every single day. And we got training camp starting on I think the 19th of September. So, by my math, that's about 3 weeks away, Chief. What do you think?
And by my math, one of the reasons I scheduled this show now is to whet everybody's appetite to get them ready for training camp. There's no way that we could go out there and start the Panther season without whetting your appetite. And like I said, George's got an open invitation. He don't need an invite. This guy come out whatever he wants to do. But tonight was a good opportunity to get ahead of this training camp, especially as I wrap up baseball, George, and I start to get into football. And of course, I'll be writing my second book later in the year once the year is over with, and then going from there. But meanwhile, all right, so we talked about Paulmaurice and some of the bold moves that Billzito made, but people have to understand it. I've always thought the Stanley Cup playoffs are way better than March Madness. Don't get me wrong.
No.
Okay. But if you have to test resolve, okay, in 16 games. But here's the biggest thing, George, and that's this. Okay. When you play overtime in the playoffs, you're playing until you don't have any legs left, not the 5 minute with all the shootouts and all that. And, I could go either way as to whether I like the shootout or not. But I understand why you do it, because you always definitely want to put yourself in a position where you have a winner all the time, no matter what.
And you need something for TV. You can't have have seasons. It's kind of like in baseball with the new extra innings rule. They don't want to wear out pitchers, and they want the games. They don't, Bally Sports or whoever's, they don't want games going until 2 a.m. Even as much fun as it was to say I was at that Mets game that went 22 innings, those are not fun games at all, right? Until they're over and you could say, oh, yeah, I was there. Other than that, those are miserable games. So, right.
So, George, I got to ask you a quick question, okay? Really quick. Do you have extrasensory perception?
I have ESPN Plus.
No, that wasn't what I asked you. ESP. You know why I asked you that question? Because now I'm going to be talking about Bally's, and I thought you were starting to read my mind. If that doesn't good,
okay, let's
that's
talk
why.
about
It's okay. That's what it's all about. That's why we have so much fun when we cover Maryland games and Panthers, wherever we end up winding up. No, that's why I asked you extrasensory protection, or in my own book, and if great minds think alike, GMTA. I'll give you all kinds of one-liners when we start going out. And I'll even treat you over to a great steakhouse here out in South Florida, and we'll talk about that at a later date. It'll just be on me. We can figure out plans on how we can do other stuff. But with that said, okay, let's transition over to Bally's, okay?
Yeah.
With the decline of Bally's, tell me what the Panthers' new TV situation will look like this year. From what I've read, but I need you to help clarify me on this, okay?
Yeah.
That they're doing away with Bally's or the insecurities or whatnot to go to a much better situation. But you're the one I need you to provide the details, please.
Yeah, all right. So the Panthers won't be on Bally's anymore. Bally Sports, and by next year it might be it's going to be FanDuel Network or something. I don't know what it's going to be. It won't be Bally's anymore because that naming change is coming. But very simple. They're just going over the air. Now, everybody gets confused when I say they were leaving cable. The only way to get the Panthers right now is either through streaming or cable on Bally's. You have to have cable that has Bally's, or a streaming service like DirecTV Now, or you stream the games through a subscription. Now, they're going to be over the air. So if you have an antenna, you'll be able to get it on channel 39 in Miami all the way to the Keys. If you have a digital antenna, you'll get it in the Keys. You'll get channel 39 in the Keys. Channel 9 in West Palm, you'll be able to get it all the way up the Space Coast. There's a West Coast station that's going to be soon to be named. But every cable channel carries these channels. So they're still going to be on your cable TV. You just don't need cable TV to get them. So it's a very good thing for the Panthers. Maybe they're not getting a check for $18 million from Bally's when the season starts. It's, their new deal with Scripps is probably half that, but I bet you they've got some kind of deal with the advertising. They will now be reaching 10 million people, they could reach 10 million people, where they only had a fraction of that, because listen, a lot of cable companies were dropping Bally's as it was. So even if you had cable, you may not get Bally's. A lot of the streaming services don't have Bally's. Like if you have Fubo or something like that, YouTube TV, they don't have Bally's. So you aren't getting it anyway. So with this, you'll be able to find the game. Now, it may be a little confusing at the beginning, but everybody's going to get it. Everybody's got access to it. And if you live in Detroit and you want to watch the Panthers, they're still going to be on ESPN Plus, just like always. So a lot of people have been confused about that. Like, what does this mean for me? I live in Atlanta, Georgia. How do I watch? I watch the same way you always did. If you watched the Panthers on TV last year in Atlanta, Same thing this year. It's just South Florida.
Okay, Candy, let's go to the chat room a little bit. I'm sure there's some pretty good questions. I want to make sure we get to everybody and stay on point with what we have. So we do have a pretty good Panthers turnout tonight in the chat room, which is good. George, I've been a Panther fan for 25 years. Good to have B-Lows on here. I see the South Florida Tribune on hockey show. Let me tell you something. I have good hockey resources. And anytime you go ahead and have a friend like George and I have been friends for a long time, he's always welcome. And I enjoy bringing George on. We get along well. You don't realize the conversations we have when we're not at the rink or at the stadium. But
better than watching the Marlins.
Well, hey, listen, we find a way to keep our conversations where. So B-Lows as pop question, who was the Panthers goalie in 2007? I don't know. That one for you.
Thomas Vokoun.
Okay, there you go. Thomas Vokoun. Okay, good on blows. All right, getting rid of Huberdeau and Brunette, transform the team. Well, yeah, definitely.
Well, hold on. I got to go back to that trivia question. He may have been asking at the end of 2006-07, that would have been Eddie Belfour and Alex Auld. Starting in 2007, it was Thomas Vokoun and Craig Anderson. So just to clear that one up.
All right, no problem. Let's go back to this
one.
Real
quick, hold this up here. Joshua, if the fans were in charge, the Kachuk deal never would have happened. You're absolutely right. Maurice never would have been. If it was up to the fans, he's absolutely right. And that's why trust the pros, Josh. Right. I mean, billzito, they stayed the course. That was good. And George,
there you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jorge.
Yeah, there you go. All right. I said, I'm not getting into pronunciation of names. If I know it's good for me, I'm leaving it alone. George wants to know how far you get. All right. Well, let's keep reading along. And that book is flaming out. I just talked about my book, which is good. You'll end up in that one again, too. But what happened to this? No, never mind. No, the chat wasn't shut off, Joshua. Part of what we're doing here is making sure you got it all from our end, incorporating what you guys.
Hey, George,
yeah, this guy's on a roll. But I'll tell you, these guys in the chat room, we got some pretty good diehards in here, and it's really encouraging to see a very active. Hello, Joshua, 9 million times over. Hello again. Scott loves watching the Marlins. Of course,
I like watching the Marlins too. I kid.
Joshua, if you think you're going to go ahead, give me a hard time about the Marlins, let me explain something. And George knows it too, that I've been covering baseball myself for a lot of years and played the game as well. So, I love hockey. My baseball connections run deep as well. And when you start to get up there a little bit older in age, you try to pace yourself a little bit about what you can do versus what you can't do. Plus what my restrictions are on the weekend in terms of covering, which I wish I could be a beat writer and do it all the time. But now, like George, building Florida Hockey Now, we're trying to build a network. So it's hard to be at every single place. So the Panthers, in my time covering them, especially with Mike Lewis as well, nothing against Adeline Beatonback, Christy Parente, nothing against them. I just work with Mike the most. And Mike remembered me a lot when I was in town as a visitor for the Wings. That's why I'm talking a little bit more about Mike. Nothing against Addie or Chrissy at all. This has nothing to do with them. It's just you can only be in so many places at one time. And for me, baseball has a big inventory, okay? Their home schedule is like 81 games. The NHL schedule itself entirety is 82. And I do have a good history with baseball, and I make no bones about it. But hockey, come on. If you're raised in an area where you were brought up with Gordie Howe, Alex Del Vecchio, I mean, give me a break. And then Steveyzerman later, although the majority of his career, there you go. Look at that. So this guy's a Red Wing guy too. So, he knows exactly a good piece of valuable memorabilia from Motown. But the reality is, I make no bones about it. I do talk about all sports. It just so happens we're in a position now. There you go. Alex Del Vecchio, unbelievable. I bet I have some old-time autographs. So this guy is not a Panther one-trick pony. This guy here has a pretty good feel about what Hockey Town is all about as well. I mean, when the Panthers did have their own team, don't be surprised if they're look at this guy now.
Look at that. 1961 Cincinnati Reds.
Look at this guy. Well, of course, he's an Ohio guy too, so that doesn't hurt. So, we try to keep it real. So in terms of, I hope the one thing that we've been able to address, because this was something I really wanted to make sure we ended up getting it out, okay, is I want people know how they can watch the Panthers, because here's the problem.
Listen, it is confusing, and I get it, because I listen, when I when I write, every time I write about the broadcasting thing, I'll get a lot of questions for it. But the truth of it is, almost everybody's cable is going to get in the South Florida area. If you live in Tampa or Orlando, no, your cable won't have Channel 9 out of West Palm. It just won't, because it does. Why would it? But if you have a digital antenna, look it up. You can get so many channels. I'm getting Channel 9 from West Palm in my house in Plantation. So you can get from all over with these digital antennas, depending on how you adjust it and all that stuff. And it's crystal clear. It's in HD. And again, if you live out of town, you're going to see the games just like always. If not, it's on Channel 39 in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. If you live in Boca, you're going to get it on 39 and 9. It's going to overlap because it's TV. In the West Coast, the Naples, Fort Myers, they're going to have it. So they're expanding their base because, listen, how many times on Bally's did they confuse, when the Orlando Magic are playing, that the Panther game got goofed up or something because they had to switch because of the territorial restrictions. That's all, it's going out in the air. If you can get it, you get it. So,
well, here's a problem we ran into this summer. The Marlins were off. I couldn't get them here in Broward County because of that situation.
Because of the Xfinity Bally's.
Exactly. So I couldn't get them.
Right.
I'm talking to my friends down in Miami, like Jessica Blaylock, Craig Minervini, and, it's great to see you guys here. Is Bally's still in business? You know what I mean?
Well, they were in a well-documented, and that hurt. That might be the straw that broke the back.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
the battle with Xfinity, because Xfinity is Comcast, owned by NBC, is one of the top cable providers in South Florida. When Bally's went off after, the Panthers were in the playoffs, it didn't matter. Their games were on TNT, ESPN, ABC. But I think that might have broke the back for when it came to the Panthers making the decision to go to channel, because they're like, well, how much more can we deal with this? Because next it's going to be DirecTV, and then after that it's going to be Charter and Frontier, all the cable. Let's just give it to the people, and that's what you got. Everybody in South Florida is going to be able to get the game for free, not cost you a dime. If you've already got Xfinity cable, you've got Channel 39, so you're good.
Well, unfortunately for the Miami Marlins, they were the sacrificial lamb that enabled the.
Yeah, it hurt. Well, it hurt a lot because of Detroit. In Detroit, now Xfinity's not big in the Michigan area, but there are some people in Michigan that couldn't get the Tigers. Same thing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And every now and then when I do bring up a Detroit reference, I'll bring up this one that's pertinent. Many years ago, when the Silverdome used to have their roof cave in, Bill Davidson had seen enough, and I'm building my own arena. What was it called? The Palace of Auburn Hills. So it takes something like this to force you to go out there and use a stimulus response.
Well, and listen, the Bally's parent company, they're in bankruptcy court. They may not come out of it. This was as good a time as any. This is probably the perfect time to move on and start your own thing, because they're the Stanley Cup champs.
Right.
If you're going to do it, why not now? I mean,
that's true.
The iron couldn't be any hotter than it is right now for the Panthers.
Yeah, your marketability is so much better when you win it all.
And we always thought that it'd be the Miami Heat to do this first. We always thought it'd be the Miami Heat that went out and was on Channel 39. And it's the Panthers that did it. So good for them. They beat the Miami Heat to the punch.
Well, good. Well, hey, listen, you know what?
For the first time since like 95, they beat,
Well, it doesn't hurt when you have Einstein / billzito running the show, and then you have a pretty good coach that's battle tested and has won a lot with nothing in Winnipeg and Carolina. It's not like he went up to a big market and failed. He ended up going out there to two markets that aren't big. And I've seen a lot of coaches over the years that have had more losses because they've had to take bad situations or start from scratch. And that goes against the record. So what I do is I don't hold the record against them. I just say, what kind of a situation did you inherit and how many championships you have? And that's how I gauge a great coach.
I'm just saying that they're like Josh just said, if the fans that were angry, that was an easy arrow to sling. He has the most losses in the NHL. Now you're seeing why. And yeah, I guess you're right. He does, but he's also coached, some real dogs over the years.
Oh, come on, trying to win up in Winnipeg. Give me a break. That's not easy to do. And I think
they moved from Atlanta for a reason, right? I mean, they were bad.
Well, yeah, but let me tell you, and we could get into this another time when we bring on Peterson. But I can tell you right now, I have a gut feeling down the road, Atlanta's going to get another team in the
They're getting a team.
suburbs.
They're getting a
Yeah,
team.
yeah, I think so too.
And
But
it'll
we're gonna,
work. It'll work this time.
yeah, they're going to the suburbs.
They go
with
to
that.
North Atlanta. It'll work.
Yeah.
And the
All right.
NHL knows it, and they're going to get $1 billion, $1.3 billion to do it. They're doing it.
There you go. The Atlanta NHL. Not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. All right, let's talk about an old Panthers coach. I got to work on them briefly, and we're going to talk about former coach Joel Quenneville. Do you think he'll ever get another head coaching job?
Yeah, I think he will. I think somebody's going to give him a chance. I think that Joel Quenneville is a very respected guy in this league. I think a lot of coaches still talk to him, either on the phone or whatever. When he got reinstated by the NHL, I think that was more for Stan Bowman, because the NHL knew that the Edmonton Oilers needed a GM. So they made an announcement that Joel Quenneville, Stan Bowman, and the other guy from the Blackhawks were now eligible. That was a move for Stan Bowman. There was only one coaching job open in the NHL at the time, and that was for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And after the who is the former Detroit coach that was at
Well, I mean, Ken Howell was a former general manager.
No. The coach,
Okay.
the coach of the Red Wings when they just won it. The last time they won it,
Mike Babcock.
Mike Babcock.
Okay.
After Columbus had to fire Mike Babcock, there was no way they were hiring Joel Quenneville. So there was only one job open. He wasn't going to get it. Now every coach that's on the hot seat has to worry about Joel Quenneville because he's ready to go. He's ready to jump in. He's a proven winner. He won here with Florida until this whole thing went down in 2021. And he'd still be the coach here. Joel Quenneville would still be the coach of the Panthers if none of this stuff blew up. So the Panthers loved having him here. He's still friends with vinnyviola.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Joel Quenneville pop up in your timelines this weekend when the Stanley Cup is at Saratoga with vinnyviola. They're horse racing pals. Just throwing that out there that you might see Joel Quenneville in the background. Long story short, yes, I do think he'll get a job. I don't know where or when. Obviously, but he's going to be the number one guy that if a team struggles out of the gate and you need a veteran voice, as long as they feel like he's rehabilitated or whatever, and he's seen the light when it comes to his past sins, and I think everybody feels like he has. The NHL's cleared him. He'll have a job.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in Detroit are hoping he ends up going with the Red Wings since he's a Windsor native.
Listen, that's a guy that's going to be on the hot seat, right, Jeff?
Yeah,
he's going to be on the hot seat.
Yeah, I think
and I love him. I think he's a terrific coach. And we'll talk about the Red Wings if you want. But yeah,
we will. I just wanted to bring that up that he's a Windsor native. I think I don't know if he was with the Windsor Spitfires, but yeah, we'll address that in a few moments. I do want to go over a couple of these. Windsor. Oh, were you really?
Yeah.
I was just recently in Toronto.
I was in Windsor for Aaron Ekblad's party.
Oh, well, good for you. Yeah, I love Windsor. I have no problem with it. I remember, I can tell you stories how many times I used to go across the border to get like Pop Rocks and things that you couldn't get when they were outlawed in Detroit. But then, I have good times in my time at Windsor. I had nothing against Detroit. And of course, we had Channel 9 back then, Hockey Night in Canada. Yeah, so we had one more station. Most people in the United States, we were bordering Canada, yes, at least in this instance. All right, let's talk about the Panthers. They conquered. Let's talk about some of the offseason moves.
Okay.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'll follow it up with a repeat. And, of course, we'll talk a little bit of Red Wings as well. So go ahead. Let's talk about, as I mentioned, they conquered. I want you to go over more of the offseason moves since you're on it every single day. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the Panthers, obviously, I mean, there were some guys that had to get paid, right, from the Panthers. They lost a couple of big guys. Brandon Montour, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Ryan Lomberg, Kevin Stenlund. I thought he was a guy that Florida might keep, but he ends up going to the Utah hockey team or whatever they are.
Right.
The Utah Hockey Club. So they lost some big guys. I mean, and it's just a matter of, this is the Stanley Cup, the salary cap era. You know it as a Detroit guy all too well.
Right.
You can't pay everybody, but Florida was able to keep Samreinhart. That's something that we've been talking about all season long, that, you know, everybody was telling me that there's no way Florida's going to be able to keep Samreinhart. And I said, just watch. He's going to take less money. He probably could have gotten $11 million somewhere, and he took 8 to stay. So the Florida Panthers did a real good job being able to sign Samreinhart. He did not want to leave. They've got, you know, they were able to sign some guys on the cheap. You know, they got Nate Schmidt from Winnipeg, who got bought out. They've got Jesper Boquist. They got Thomas Nosek, EJ Greer. Who else did they sign? The other Boquist, Adam. You know, a number 8 draft pick not too long ago with the Blackhawks, who was a big piece of that Seth Jones trade to Columbus. Columbus thought he was going to be a star. They end up getting rid of him. Florida gets him cheap. He's a restricted free agent, so the Panthers have his rights for the next couple of years. That might be the most underrated signing of the offseason if this works. You might have just found yourself a top 4 defenseman for the next couple of years, cheap. And, you know, so billzito working some magic, trying to bring in some guys with limited funds, just like he did last year. You know, you look at some of the moves they made last year that worked out. They re-signed Dmitry Kulikov on the cheap. They did a real nice job of restocking things. Florida, listen, they're going to have a different fourth line. They're going to have a couple different defensemen. And Spencer Knight is now the backup to Sergei Bobrovsky as Anthony Stolarz moves on to Toronto. But this is basically the guts of this team is still together. This team has good bones, you know, as we used to say back in the day. There's good bones here, and the Panthers are going to be fine.
Well, Vladimir Tarasenko went to Detroit.
Yeah, he went
there.
We all knew he wasn't staying. You couldn't afford him.
Right. Well, and Mike Illitch, let me tell you, if he could buy championships, he would have gotten more if the salary cap era hadn't gotten in the way. He was making deals right and left, but hey, at that time, he took advantage of the system. Let's face the reality. The NHL salary cap is a lot lower than it is in Major League Baseball. I mean, seriously.
Well, there is no salary cap in Major League Baseball, but listen, people boo Gary Bettman when he comes on the ice here in South Florida. They ought to be standing up and applauding. He would not let this team leave South Florida. He's been a champion for hockey down here, and him making sure that there is a salary cap keeps teams like Florida able to compete with Detroit, because Detroit would have just written a check. I mean, if there was no salary cap, you'd have Detroit, Toronto, Montreal, and the Rangers and everybody else go on your merry way, because they would have bought every single player they could. Now with the salary cap, everybody's on even footing. Now, if you're a Montreal fan, you hate it. But if you're a Detroit fan, you hate it, because you know how much money your organization makes, but you can spend just as much as the Arizona Coyotes. Is that fair? I don't know, but it definitely leads to parity. And that's why you see the Montreal Canadiens in a long rebuild. You see Detroit in a long rebuild. And you've got teams like Florida, Tampa Bay, Vegas, LA was there for a while. Anaheim has got a cup. All these other teams have it's been an even playing field as far as salary caps go.
Well, and Chris Driedger, he was nothing but good for the team for a period of time. I don't know.
Driedger is going to come here. He's been hurt. He's had some injury issues. He comes in here on a cheap deal, and he'll give Spencer Knight some fight. If Spencer, if somebody struggles, listen. If Sergei Bobrovsky gets hurt or gets sick, you bring in Driedger, and you've got back. So you're fine. The Panthers have done a nice job with that backup goalie position the last couple of years. Alex Lyon, as you know. 2 years ago, and then this year they got Anthony Stolarz, who nobody really knew much about, and he had statistically the best season in the NHL this season.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you look at additions and subtractions. I don't care what market you're in. Toronto, by the way, hadn't won a Stanley Cup in '67.
Right.
I mean, a Stanley Cup in '67. How many people were born then? I know I was born, but that's another story. I'm not here to criticize the Maple Leafs. And
I'm just saying the salary cap keeps things.
Oh yeah, no, they keep everything.
And Montreal, Detroit, all those teams are going to have their. Listen, Montreal is building a very nice team. Detroit is building a very nice team. There are going to be teams that come up and go, but if there was no salary cap in the NHL, it would be the wild, wild west, and you'd have baseball where you've got the Los Angeles Dodgers with a $300 million payroll and the Marlins with 15. I mean, it's just, who wants that?
Well, all right, so the Panthers nearly made history for all the wrong reasons. They're up 3-0.
Yeah.
And obviously Edmonton gets back in it. They end up getting back in the series, and then Florida closes it out. How much pressure do you feel that the Panthers felt knowing that, hey, this is a record we don't want to be a part of, knowing full well that Edmonton battled their way to stay in the series, only to finally close it out? Do you think this could have been a long, damaging thing for the Florida Panthers had they have not been able to close the series out?
Yeah, I think that's a stink that doesn't come off you. I think even being on that ice after Game 7, there was more of a feeling of relief than celebration because the Panthers knew it. They were going to go down in history as one of the sport's greatest choke jobs. Even Paulmaurice talked about it. He said when he came into the building the day before the game, ESPN had like a banner up. I guess it was probably like one of the early morning ESPN shows like Get Up or Wake Up or whatever the heck it is. And it was like biggest choke job ever, Florida Panthers. And he was like, couldn't get the TVs changed before the guys came in to see it. Yes, there was a lot of pressure on the Panthers after that. Now, Matthew Tkachuk, kind of sold it like, no, this is, we won 3, they won 3. This is perfect. And listen, the team came out and played great that first period. And that's what Paulmaurice said. He goes, if we don't play good that first period, we're in big trouble. They played a very good, strong first period. I think it was tied 1-1, but he was like, no, we're good. We can play this game. We're fine. But yeah, that's a stink. 15 years from now, Sashabarkov's going into the Hockey Hall of Fame. People are talking about, well, he was part of that Florida team that was up 3-0 and lost the Stanley Cup. The Panthers, they would never have recovered from that. I mean, you even if they won the cup down the road, they would still, because nobody, what is it? The 47 Detroit Red Wings, I think, are the only team that have blown a 3-0 lead in a championship series. Nobody even knows who they are.
I think it was if I remember right, George, I believe it was 1942 against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
During World War II, nobody remembers anything. Like The Athletic actually did some research and did some research on that team, and they were terrible. They shouldn't have even been in that final. But they were because of World War II or whatever. They were using factory workers on the ice. Nobody remembers that until somebody goes up 3-0, and then they get brought up. Okay, the 42 Detroit Red Wings. Nobody knows that team at all. This Florida Panther team, for the next 50 years, people go, hey, remember that Florida team? I don't remember who beat them, but that hockey team from Florida. I mean, they would have been talking about it forever.
Yeah, it would have been a grill on their back. A few other questions, just so everybody knows. Okay, the Sports Exchange will be at about 9:10 tonight Eastern time. Obviously, George and I are giving you about the best Panthers information that we can, because we scheduled this broadcast as a preview towards training camp, which is 3 weeks out. So with that said, you have United States and Canada. Okay, George, Edmonton, and you talk about the distance between Edmonton and Florida to begin with. My goodness. I mean, if I were collecting frequent flyers, I'd have a trip all the way to Iceland by now.
Yeah,
but now the Canadians, Canada, U.S., and the last team in Canada to win a Stanley Cup was the 1993 Montreal Canadiens, coached by Jacques Demers. So do you think that the Panthers...
I love Jacques.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's pretty good. He used to have a restaurant back home, too.
What a good...
But he's part of a trivia question. So do you feel, and obviously you're closer than anybody else, that the weight of the Panthers goes beyond blowing that 3-0 streak, that they'd be the team that allowed Canada to break that long drought? It was now United States and Canada. No. You don't think so?
No, I don't think anybody was even talking about that. They were at the beginning of the series. People were saying, the weight of Canada and all that. And I think that, I think it was Matthew Tkachuk again. We were laughing. I'm like, hey, Matthew, do you think Calgary's rooting for for Edmonton. He's like, no, they're rooting for us. Calgary's rooting for me. They're rooting for the Panthers because they hate Edmonton. But no, I never got that sense. I mean, maybe some of the Canadian media, because the Canadian media was here in force for the 4 games that were played in Sunrise, the Canadian media, and it got bigger. Like Game 7, every local broadcaster in Canada was here, doing live hits. So there was a lot of talk of that in Canada, not here though. I think here it was just the 3-0 thing. Like when the Panthers won Game 3, I think it was a Thursday night. Game 4 was a Saturday. Right. And the Stanley Cup's in the building, and everybody's talking. You've got Paulmaurice. Your team can win the Stanley Cup tonight, and he's like, "Oh my God, couldn't sleep last." They all from that to Game 7, where everybody's like, "Dude, you've kind of choked the bed here." You know what I mean?
Right.
Again, that's a stink that I don't think, because listen. The Florida Panthers for the last 20 years have had that reputation. Same old Panthers, right? You talk, the Panthers are in 3rd place, right? Yeah, they'll blow, because they've had that reputation in South Florida. Right. Not recently, but you blow a 3-0 lead, people would be like, same old Panthers, Yeah, right. And then you've got next year, every city you go to, every team that comes in here and wants to talk to Paulmaurice pregame, every broadcaster in there. So, Coach, how you guys recovered from that loss in the stand? You'd have to talk about it all year long. Yeah. It would never stop. It would never stop.
Right. All right. Personal opinion. I want yours on this too. 2-2-1-1-1. To me, I like the 2-3-2 format, albeit you had 2 days to travel with all that distance.
Yeah.
But give me your perception. Which way should it be? 2-2-1-1-1 or 2-3-2?
I think the 2-3-2 works. I mean, that's what we grew up with, right? I mean,
yeah,
the World Series used to be that. I don't remember. Is the World? Yeah, the World Series is still 2-3-2, right? So if it's good enough for the World Series, I think it's good enough for hockey. And you get rid of this. I mean, because listen. The NHL back in the day used to have a media charter wherever they don't have those anymore. So you had all these sports writers that, trying to get paying all this money for 2-3-2, go there, camp out for a bit. If it's 3, you're coming home, you got 2 games, you can win it on the road. I don't know. But again, it is what it is.
Hey, listen, that was one of your easier questions. I've hit you with everything but the kitchen sink, but I still have a couple more kitchen sink topics, so hang in there. All right, so now let's talk about the obvious question, George. Will the Panthers repeat? Obviously, they're the hunted, and obviously we've talked about the departures and the additions.
Sure.
But now they're the champion. Everybody's coming after you. You're going to have big crowds there. But now, like every other repeating as champion in the NHL is probably one of the toughest tasks to do, because you have to win 16 to get there to finish it off. But let's just leave all that out of the way. Do you think that the Florida Panthers, with the group that they have, know what you have in the front office? Vinnyviola, supportive owner, billzito, nothing short of of a genius. And then, of course, we have Paulmaurice. So I guess I don't know if we're having any issues, whether anybody can see the chat or not, but I can see it on my end. So, and George can see it on his, which is
why
George.
We're able to I can see it when it pops up. Yeah.
Yeah, we can. So when we see it, we address the questions as they fit in. But let's go back to what I just asked you. Okay. And that's this. Do you think that the Panthers can repeat in this coming season?
Well, real quick, Josh just asked if the roster is set. They'll probably have a couple free agent guys come in as on tryouts, but maybe a fourth line guy might make the team, but it's pretty much set. Yeah, I mean, they always have the free agent tryout. Maybe 2 veteran guys or something. We'll see, but I think they're set. As far as the team repeating, listen, there's a reason why teams don't repeat. The last team to win back-to-back championships were the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I'm not disparaging the Lightning at all, but that was a completely different situation. Their first championship came during the COVID year. It was in a bubble. They started the playoffs from scratch. Each team had 6 months off, because of COVID. Then they go to Toronto, and Okay. And then the next year, it's a 50-game season and they win the championship again in front of no fans. So listen, they didn't have to play an 82-game season back-to-back years. Florida made the finals last year. They won it this year. They've played over 200 hockey games in the last 2 years. That is a lot of mileage on these Panthers. No, I don't think they're going to win the championship again, because how can you? That's another 100 games, 100-plus games that they've got to play on these legs and everything. Can they? Yes, they've got the talent to do it. But at some point, this team's just going to run out of magic. They're going to run out of gas. But this team's built for the long haul. So, they're the favorites. They're the betting favorites in Vegas to win the Stanley Cup. But it's tough, folks. That's all I'm saying. Tampa Bay did it. Yes, they did. They did it. But they did it in a weird way. And there's a reason why teams don't repeat in the NHL, especially for a team that went to the finals 2 straight years. It's going to be tough. That's all.
That's all right. That's a good question.
Not being Captain Downer, but that is a lot of hockey games to have to play. Do I think the Panthers are a playoff team? Yes. I do think the Panthers are going to make the playoffs. Right. After that, anything can happen. But then you're getting again into those 7-game series with those tired legs, and they got a lot of miles on them.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that's one of the major reasons why Florida Hockey Now is such an excellent publication, because you're not one of those guys who's a homer who's going to automatically jump on here and just say, yeah, no matter what. You talk about journalism, George, the way it has to be done, objectively, albeit you cover the local team here, and it's certain, but that's different, okay?
Yeah. And I would tell, if Aaron Ekblad asked me this, hey, do you think what I heard you said, I'd tell him. I'm like, dude, I go do it.
Yeah, right. Don't tell us about it.
But I don't think you're going to.
One of my favorite lines, George, in the industry was, don't tell us about it, show us when you're talking on TV. And that's what I've always thought. Don't tell us about it, show us. And it's our
the respect, the respect is there. This is a darn good hockey team.
Right.
But that's a lot to ask. But we'll see. Hey, once you get the playoffs, anything can happen, baby.
Well, let's face it. President's Cup winners aren't guaranteed of winning it all. It's the best team with a goaltender that you can stand on. A goaltender will lead you. If you have a hot goaltender, you have a great opportunity. I won't get into that tonight, although you saw a couple in Boston and New York that were excellent goaltenders.
Yes.
And one in Winnipeg at the end.
Florida saw some really good goalies, didn't they?
They sure did.
They sure
did.
Even Skinner with Edmonton really turned his thing. Skinner's
good. Well, he turned it on later in the series to make it 7 games is what he did. So, there's no question about it. Folks. So one big rule in journalism that George and I could both say that we have dealt with for many, many years is you got to be objective, lay out the facts, and let these games get played. I mean, we're not – if I want to be in a prognostication business, that's fine. I have no interest in doing it because it goes against my journalistic expectation is to educate, entertain, and inform. And that's what I believe we have to do. And that's what we're here doing tonight. All right. Now, obviously, we have some Detroit fans out in the chat, and we appreciate the contributions of the Panthers, which is why I allowed more time on it. And I'm glad you came out a little bit earlier so that we could do it and leave no stones on there. Go bring up that Red Wing program. So, all right, we'll talk about the Red Wings.
It just happened to be sitting here on my desk. I don't even know why.
I don't know. Maybe you just knew tonight you were going to go out there and talk to a guy from Motown. But so, all right, let's talk about the Wings a little bit.
Yeah.
8-year playoff drought nearly ended it, for the last game of the year. So let's, you certainly, every time we talk about the Wings, we've talked about it in a very positive way.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts about where the Red Wings go. You think this year that they finally go out there and they get in the playoffs?
Well, I think adding Vladimir Tarasenko is going to be a great addition to the Red Wings. Listen, this is a team that still has a lot of money under the salary cap. They're going to be able to make some moves. They didn't make a whole lot of moves in the offseason, which I found a little surprising. They're kind of running it back. They got Patrick Kane back. But they're kind of running back last year's team. And listen, Detroit was improved last year, but kind of faded down the stretch. Are they a playoff team? I kind of think they are, but you look at how tough the Atlantic is. It's not going to be easy for Detroit. You've got Ottawa looks better, but I don't know about them. Buffalo looks better. They're due. You've got Florida, Tampa, Toronto, Boston. That's 4 in the Atlantic. Is Detroit better than any of those 4 teams? I don't think that they are. Now they might. Now somebody's got to come out of that mix. Maybe it's Florida, maybe it's Tampa. I don't know. But that's what makes it tough in the Atlantic, is because you've got Buffalo and Detroit chomping at the bit.
Right.
And you've got the big four in the Atlantic who don't want to give up what they've got. So it's going to be interesting to see. That's why they play 82 games in the National Hockey League. But I like Detroit. I think they're well coached. I think they've got a good team. But I don't think that Stevie Y did a whole lot this offseason to help them, other than bring in Vladimir Tarasenko. They got the defenseman. I know they got a good defenseman. I don't cover Detroit.
Well, they also shored up their goaltending a little bit too. You know,
who did they bring in?
I believe the guy from LA, Cam.
Talbot. They got Talbot.
Yeah, they did pick him up. I mean,
sorry. If I knew we'd talk about Detroit, I would have looked this stuff up.
It doesn't matter. It was just a throw-in because I was getting some stuff from the chat. No, it's no big deal.
So I'm not giving you an educated, but I'm giving you my thought that I love their coach. I love Jeff. But we'll see, because again, you've got 4 teams in the Atlantic that don't want to give up their position. Now, could there be 5 teams in the Atlantic make the playoffs? Absolutely. Two could be a wild card. We'll see. But
some of the things that I end up incorporating, George, in shows is if I follow the lead of the chat room and you see a lot of people from certain areres, I like to incorporate them.
Yeah, no. I like to. Yeah. I like Detroit. Yeah. I was just in Detroit.
Yeah, well, there you go. Hey, that's not so bad. I mean, Derek Lalonde, though, is in year 3. I got to believe that this is a make or break year for him. And of course, Joelquenneville sitting out there as well. And so you never know. But what do you think? Do you think this is Derek Lalonde? You know, he's got to get in this year. Otherwise, maybe he may not see a 4th year.
As far as Derek goes, I think he is. He's not, like I said, he's kind of on a hot seat. But if they get off to a good start, he was the assistant coach in Tampa under John Cooper. I think the world of both those guys. We'll see. We'll see. Joelquenneville would be the obvious big splash move in Detroit. But does Stevie Y want to make that? He had an opportunity to make a big hire a couple years ago when he hired Derek and didn't do it. And, we'll see.
All right. And lastly, as far as the Wings, and then we'll give you an opportunity to go out there and get Florida Hockey Now again. But talk about Steveyzerman. We thought, he did a marvelous job with Tampa. Yes. And now he's trying to utilize his Iser plan, as they call it, of building, developing, and then fitting in pieces in free agency. And maybe the reason he didn't, and I'm only speculating from what I see. I follow hockey all over the place. Panthers, I follow it all because it's a topic that I am certainly close to. Now we have a hockey show, Fire Up Florida, which has turned into one of myself, Rod Peterson. You're going to be on there whenever you have time to come on. But let's talk about Steveyzerman real quickly. Do you think that he's just about ready to turn the corner with the Red Wings?
Again, time will tell, right? He was able to get – listen, he was able to get Kane last year. We weren't sure how Kane was going to play. He turned out to be a real nice signing. They've made some good signings. But people are wondering, if he can replicate what he did in Tampa. He built that Tampa team into a champion. That team has his fingerprints all over it. But, we'll see. Again, the division does him no favors.
Okay. Well, no, that's fair. And I agree. The Red Wings have their work cut out for them. And you got billzito calling the shots at the Panthers. And the fact that they built a new practice facility out in Fort Lauderdale certainly is another positive step that they're doing to make sure that this club is situated by being fan-friendly by going there. I like the ice stand. It's only about 10, 15 minutes away from where I live out in Coral Springs, but I understand a lot about the War Memorial Auditorium area because I used to cover boxing back in the day. So I know about that area, and it's centrally located, so they're able to more or less take their brand to Fort Lauderdale. What the Panthers have done in Broward County has been unbelievable. And obviously the anticipation is, all right, we've got this championship. Can we drop from Dade? And it's closer to West Palm Beach. And that'd be a long-running story about where the Marlins should have put their city, but we won't even bother with that one tonight. But what I want you to do, I am really thankful that George Richards is willing to come on tonight. Spend a lot of time as the Panthers get ready for training camp. So what I'd like you to go out there and do for the third time, because I believe that we get new people as we go on, is I want everybody to know how they can subscribe to Florida Hockey Now.
Well, go to floridahockeynow.com and check on the Join Us button and, subscribe. $3 a month or $30 a year. The annual pass. Come and see us. floridahockeynow.com, your daily source of Florida Panthers news and information. Check it out.
You won't find a better, more credible individual than George Richards, who not only does his writing as well, but I know he does up here on podcasts from time to time. And we're just thankful that he's willing to join us tonight. This is the Motor City Mad Mouth show. My name is Scott Morganroth. Please be joined by Florida Hockey Now and Miami Herald writer George Richards. Candy, what I want you to do is give one last station break. We need George to stay on for just a moment or so after the show, and then we'll be able to wrap things up. But meanwhile, Candy, final station break. And yeah, Joshua Dora, I'm glad you've been active in the chat. George Richards knows his stuff. So many new people covering the Panthers. Much respect for the old. And there you go. He's always followed you, and I'm glad that Joshua was very active tonight in the chat. I know he wanted us to put this show together, but I didn't make sure the timing was all right. Candy, go ahead and take over.
So the South Florida Tribune published a book last December, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by Scott, the Motor City Mad Mouth Morganroth. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. Get your copy today. There is a link on the South Florida Tribune's website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can get a link that you can hit the link for this, or you can hit the link for South Florida Tribune merchandise. If you need a hat, a backpack, maybe a baseball shirt, go get yours today. You can also, if you like to listen to podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. Monday nights, we talk hockey on Fire Up Florida. We talk baseball on 108 Stitches. Tuesday night, we talk football on Inside the Pigskin. Wednesday nights, Motor City Mad Mouth Show. And then Sports Exchange, where we talk anything goes. And then Thursday nights, last but not least, is the Fire Up Show, where you never know what we're going to be talking about there. We also, if you want to sponsor a show or advertise, call Scott, 954-304-4941. If you missed anything, it's been scrolling on the bottom ticker all show long. Or if you're listening, you can always rewind and play it again. Back to you, Scott.
Well done, Candy. Well done, everybody in the chat room. Just so everybody knows, looking forward to doing more and more projects with George. He's one of the classiest people I've ever been connected with, and he's in my book, the one that Candy talked about. So meanwhile, we want to thank everybody for joining us here on the Motor City Mad Mouth Show. It's been a treat special to have George on anytime I could get him in here. But now, obviously, we do everything we can to make every minute count. So meanwhile, kudos to the chat room, but bigger kudos to you, George. And do you have a Twitter handle that people can go ahead and follow you on for those that are active on there?
Yeah, it's confusing. At George Richards. That's it.
Boy, that was tough. Boy, I've seen tougher things on. So
at George Richards on Twitter. Check her out. Hey, how about my YouTube channel, the Florida Hockey Now, Hockey Now YouTube channel? Check that out. Got a lot not a lot of live stuff, but a lot of videos from like we had yesterday, how they made the ice and all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, yeah, like I told you earlier, you could have put that on there, but better late than never, because
I forgot about it. Check out the YouTube channel.
Yeah, but you know what? People are going to be watching this show, especially the Panther diehards, as well as hockey fans. I'm going to get it out there. We follow each other on Twitter anyway. And I will tag you when this thing goes on there. So do me a favor, reshare it to your followers as well. But meanwhile, there you have it. So George Richards has his own YouTube channel, Florida Hockey Now. Subscribe to George Richards, as we appreciate your loyalty to us as well. With that said, Sports Exchange is coming up after the Motor City Mad Mouth Show. So once again, hope you enjoyed this show, and we're looking forward to the next time. Good night, everybody, and we'll see you in a short bit.
Happy trails.